A few of you have heard me talk before about buried services and the impact it has, but I thought I'd just start with Lend-Lease. And when you think of Lend-Lease and our suppliers, what do you think of? House builder, residential, defence, commercial? Maybe. A little bit of background. Lend-Lease is a global company, 17,000 employees. Do we do civil engineering? Do we dig big holes? Put your hands up if you think we do. How big? Let's start. What do you think's the biggest hole we're going to build? 100 million? 200 million? Billion? 2 billion? Roughly as of last week, the business is going to construct 2 tunnels in Australia with a value a little over £3.5 billion. So we do some big holes in the ground. When I started looking at buried services and what we were doing 2 years ago, we were experts. We were industry leading at hitting buried services. I don't know anybody who was better. We could hit a buried service that wasn't buried. HV cable. You've heard the saying, a blind man on a galloping horse could have seen that service. HV cable, as thick as your arm. And we put a machine through it.
The new permit is like a traffic light system. It's red, amber, green. So the first section is the red section. So when we're completing this section, there shouldn't be any works happening out on site. This is essentially a desk study. This is us taking all our combined information and bringing it together onto one page. The amber section, page 2, is trial holes and hand digging. So at this stage, there's still no full mechanical excavation, which comes at stage 3, which is the green section, which we will come on to in a second. So this ensures a clear process. And just for clarity, that is called a ground disturbance permit, but that's in the red tab at the top, ground disturbance. So it doesn't only affect groundworks, it can also be our groundwork contractors for that matter. It could be an electrical contractor driving in an earthing rod or any kind of ground disturbing activities whatsoever.
So this is a sort of thing that you would do when you do your utility searches. You would submit your inquiries to generally what we call the top 5. They will then respond back to you guys. Statutory requirement for those is 28 days. So if you're planning your works well in advance, hopefully you'll get your responses back. But what about the others? And this is where the guessing game comes in. Wherever you are in the United Kingdom, not everybody knows who the utility companies are. And there are 300 plus utility businesses that own assets out there that you don't always know about. So what are we going to do about it? Well, this service, Line Search Before You Dig, is what we believe is probably the biggest single source service utility check system within the UK at the moment. It's free to use, completely free to use to you as contractors. Our business model is based on asset owners who actually pay us to protect their assets. So Line Search Before You Dig it's a double-edged sword for us. We've got asset owners who want to protect their assets as businesses, and then we've got utility users, yourselves, who are trying to protect themselves from damaging utilities.
The HSE guidance, Avoiding Danger from Underground Services, HSG 47, was revised and published earlier this year. The revision brought the guidance up to date whilst maintaining the core expectation of plan, identify and avoid. It is worth highlighting that HSG 47 is not an instruction book, rather it sets out a process for planning and delivering work safely.
So what is looked into and what is a very, very small change, I would suggest, within HSG 47, but could be a step change in the way people look at it. He now talks about training. Is it training or is it competency? His wording that those doing the survey need to have sufficient knowledge and experience in the use of survey equipment and techniques. HSG 47 is avoiding danger from underground services. It isn't avoiding cable strikes. As far as he is concerned, as far as the Health and Safety Authority are concerned, when they go to look at an incident, the fact that it turned out not to be a cable shouldn't really be a factor. There are other utilities that are just as dangerous as cables, but everybody always points towards the electric because that's the one that makes the big bang, that's the one that gets the burns. PAS 128 is basically a BSI standard. PAS 128 is to become an integral part of utility detection and mapping. It's a publicly available specification. Therefore, it's an agreed way of doing something. It's been driven by the industry's needs and stakeholders. The long-term goal is to get it to a British standard, and from then, the BSI, their business model is then to try to get it in either a European or a national standard.
So in terms of coming here today to talk to you about buried services, I thought I'd have a review of some of the incidents that we've had within Land Securities. And actually, we've had 4 or 5 service strikes. A couple of those have been on the NOVA project. And when I look back at some previous presentations that I've done years and years ago, in actual fact, the trends are exactly the same. They're exactly the same reasons that the service strikes are happening. It doesn't feel like anything's really moved forward and anything's progressed in terms of avoiding strikes. So some of the sort of key themes: we're not filling in permits appropriately, we don't have good detection methods, we think it's slightly in a different location than it actually is, we work outside the permit. So in terms from a client perspective, actually we've got a huge part to play as well, and we've got a responsibility as a client to make sure we provide excellent information, and we also challenge the designers to really consider how they eliminate risk, and that includes avoiding services. So it's quite a different concept if you go up to an architect and say, why are you putting the building there? Could you not move it a little bit and avoid that massive raft of services in the ground and actually make it a lot more easy to build? In terms of time as well, the time that we give contractors to do the job does make the difference in terms of pre-planning to avoid services, to get the right information, to positively locate those services through vacuum excavation or any other method.
Put your hand up who all know about RFID tagging, please. Ooh, look at this, it's great. For those who've never used it, if you think of the key fob in your car and you press it, the car opens, the tag is in your key fob, the reader is the car. You can open it from any angle, from the front, side, back. If you look at what we're doing, we're putting the tag into the ground to record all the assets in that ground, and the reader is a locator that can find it. With the use of a marker, either in a hole that you've had to dig to make sure what was there, when you've had a non-invasive survey, and you find something, you can drop the marker in, record it, record anything else that is in that hole, and simply have it as a record. It's accurate. When you do put a surface in, a survey in, or a utility, you have to bury it again, you have to cover it over, and then you've got the everyday working that's going over it until the next trench needs to be dug. What we're saying is that if we put a marker in and mark the utility that's going in, and also, unlike a lot of the utility companies, we not only mark what you're putting in, but we also mark all the other utilities that are in the hole, in the trench, or where you're working on. Then we can send that information within minutes or the same day, the record of what's under the ground.
How many of you have heard of the giant pouched rat? Therefore, you can't join in. The giant pouched rat is quite a, well, he's a bit of an unlucky rat. Because what they found is that the giant pouched rat had a very sensitive nose, and that it could smell TNT. And it could smell TNT up to about 4 feet underground. Now, what that meant is that when they were looking to remove mines and buried explosive in places like Iraq, they had one volunteer, Mr. Rat. My challenge is that when we have our next director's breakfast, I want us to be able to sit there and say, we've had no service strikes since we met at the conference, all of us. Every service strike we have seen and recorded is avoidable. My friend, the Fat Rat, takes them 3 months to train him to get his behaviour correct. Cost £3,000 to train Fat Rat. They've sourced 25,000 mines and lost no rats. That's really effective training, isn't it?